I'd like to welcome
All right.
everyone who is joining us across the country and even across the world for the CSLI live stream event with Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, titled Defending the Faith for a New Generation. We're excited to have you with us today. I'm Joel Woodruff, president of the Institute, and it's been a blessing for me to be a part of the work of the Institute and to be able to have speakers like Josh and Sean to address people on these important topics today. Just a quick introduction, Josh and Sean. Josh has been involved in ministry for over 5 decades and written or co-authored over 150 books. Imagine that. Those of you who are from the generation X or Boomer generation may be familiar with Josh's book, More Than a Carpenter, a book that sold over 10 million copies, and also Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which World Magazine titled one of the most influential books of the 20th century. Josh was a skeptic who, when he considered the claims of Christ, eventually became a disciple of Jesus. And so we're looking forward to hearing from Josh in a moment. And you may have guessed it, Sean McDowell is Josh's son. Like his father, he's committed to presenting the case for Christ and for the Christian faith. Sean has a PhD in apologetics, a professor at Biola University in Talbot Seminary, and he has actually come alongside his dad in doing a new version of Evidence That Demands a Verdict, a book I highly recommend that is a great resource for people, and as well has edited a book called Apologetics for a New Generation, another great book. So we're looking forward to having them with us here today. Now, this father-son team really comes to us with a unique perspective. We are living in a changing world. Every day, it seems like there's some new technology, some new adaptation in our culture, and they bring a perspective from the past and the present, looking forward to the future. And so we're looking to forward to hearing how we can take the gospel, which never changes, and bring it into a changing culture, this good news and hope. We're grateful to have this Zoom webinar technology. I think many of you are getting familiar with it. In this case, on the webinar, those of you who are listening in or watching, you'll be able to hear the presentations, and you'll also be able to make comments or ask questions in the chat room. And so I encourage you to text in the chat room your questions, your comments. We will be tracking those. And after each presentation today, we will have a Q&A time, a question and answer period, and we'll be taking many of our questions from the chat room. So please feel free to put those questions in there. We'll be monitoring those questions during the broadcast. Our schedule basically will be as follows. Between now and 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time, it'd be 9:50 on the Pacific Time, we will be hearing from Josh McDowell on the topic of a perfect storm, hope in the midst of a crisis, followed by a Q&A time. Then we'll take a 10-minute break. And then at 1 o'clock Eastern Time or 10 o'clock Pacific Time, we will hear then from Sean McDowell on the topic of understanding and reaching today's generation, getting some insights on what's happening today and how we might communicate the gospel. Well, that will also be followed by Q&A time. I'll be acting as MC and asking the questions that you send in. And then take another 10-minute break. And then at 2 o'clock Eastern Time or 11 o'clock Pacific Time, we'll have our final session in which we'll listen into a conversation between Josh and Sean, the father and son, as they discuss the topic of passing on the faith to the next generation. Looking forward, just picking up practical ways that we can share the good news of Jesus Christ in today's world. And then we'll wrap up sharply at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So I would like to invite Josh, if you want to come back on the video feed, I'd love to have you join us now. I'm just so glad to have you part of the C.S. Lewis Institute presentation here today. And we're looking forward to your diagnosis of the culture and all that will be taking place. I'd just like to pray for begin our time. Father, I pray that you would guide us today. Pray for Josh, Sean. We pray for all the participants that as we think about the world and to think about your wonderful good news, your greatness, and your love for us, help us, Lord, to learn today how we might better interact with our culture and our world today. and bring the hope of Jesus Christ into it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, Josh, I'd like to invite you now to take it away and give your presentation,
No,
initial
I
presentation.
thought I'd try to be as safe as I can around this virus, but then I realized I sanitized the camp, so I think I can go without it.
That's great. That's wonderful. You're looking safe and cool now. That's great.
Every generation has challenges, cultural challenges, theological challenges, and all. And there's three challenges we're facing to pass our faith on to the next generation. And I want to touch on one in a major way and two in a minor way. But the first, to understand culture today and to be able to communicate to others, especially young people, we need to understand we've had a total, complete epistemological shift in culture. You say, whoa, that's a big word, epistemological. Well, we get the word epistle from it. It means the nature and the source of truth. What truth is and where it comes from, there's been a total change over the last number of years. And I want to illustrate this. We've always had two generations, parents and youth, adults and young people. But for one of the first times in history, and this is true of almost every culture in the world, we now have not only two generations, we have two distinct cultures between adults and youth. And this is how it's taken place because we have to understand it. Because right now, so many adults are not communicating with young people because we're using two different types of language almost. For hundreds of years, this was the paradigm of truth. At the video screen of history at the top, you have a personal creator God in which all truth resided. Scientific truth, historical truth, philosophical truth, theological truth, epistemological truth, all resided in a personal creator God. The bottom of the screen is created man, who for hundreds of years, it was taught, you responded to the truth that's in the personal nature of God. And then this gradually started to change with 3 to 4 movements in history. The first was the Renaissance, about 1350. The Renaissance came along and said, we don't need God. Look how great man is, mankind is. And what the Renaissance did was bring the concept of a personal creator God about a quarter of the way down the video screen in history and elevated man. And it wouldn't have gone further than that if it hadn't been followed by the Enlightenment, about 1685. The Enlightenment came onto the scene and said, we don't need God. Now notice why. It's different than the Renaissance. We don't need God. Why? See how great man can reason. Man can reason. Mankind can reason through sin, can reason through the solution. And what the Enlightenment did was bring the concept of personal creator another quarter of the way down the video screen, elevated man. And then this was depicted by, ever seen this picture of Jesus with his arm on his shoulder of a captain in an old wooden boat in a huge storm? And the captain captioned, Jesus is the master of my destiny. Well, to tell the difference between that and now with the Enlightenment on the scene, what it did historically, it took Jesus' arm off the shoulder and the title read, I am the master of my destiny. That's what the Enlightenment did. And then along came, I call it a movement. A lot of people don't see the theological, epistemological and everything significance of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution came onto the scene and many people thought, we don't need God. Why? See how great man can create. This was in the days of the huge machines were developed, patents, everything. And it was exploding just about everywhere in the world. And what the Industrial Revolution did was bring a personal concept that got another quarter of the way down to an elevated man. And then onto the scene in about 1860, 1870, Darwinism. Darwinism came onto the scene historically and said, Now listen carefully. We don't even need the concept of a personal creator, because there were two questions that the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the Industrial Revolution couldn't answer: the origin of man and the origin of the universe. Darwinism came along and gave an explanation for the origin of man, origin of the universe. And with that, what happened was the concept that there's a personal creator God in which all truth resides fell off the video screen of history, and it left created humanity. Now, out of this progression from Renaissance to the Enlightenment, to the Industrial Revolution, to Darwinism, came three of the most influential thought patterns today. The first is tolerance. Tolerance is described this way: all values, all beliefs, all lifestyles are equal. There is no difference. Of all values, all lifestyles, all beliefs are equal. So here you have the entire maze of humanity. So how could one person say to another person, your thoughts aren't as good as mine, your beliefs are less than mine? Because where's your external reference point? There is none. Because to them, a personal creator God, which truth resided in, fell off the video screen in history. And so tolerance is one of the main values of culture all over the world today. And second is multiculturalism. Now, multiculturalism is tolerance applied to culture. You got that? It's tolerance applied to culture. Multiculturalism teaches that all cultures, all their values, all their beliefs, all their lifestyle are equal. Because how can one culture criticize another culture? Where's your external reference point? There is none. It's all internal, not external. And then out of this came a third major belief in today's culture: diversity. Now, diversity is so often misunderstood, even by Christians. Diversity basically means of all the diverse beliefs, all the diverse lifestyles, all the diverse truths, everything, among all the diversity, everything is equal. That's what diversity means. Amidst all the diverse beliefs, they're equal. Because how can one belief say to another belief, you're as good as mine? Where's your external reference point? There is none. It's only your personal opinion, personal feeling, your personal thought. And so diversity is equality in the midst of diversity. All this came out of this progression of history over 4, 5, 600 years. Now, another implication of it is this: for adults, for those about, let's say, 30, 34 and older, 30 and older, 33 and older, when it comes to truth, truth is discovered. Like it says in the scripture, you should know this truth, you should discover the truth, and the truth will set you free. In other words, truth is external, it's subjective, apart from yourself being subjective. And you can discover that truth. But to the youth, many young people in this culture now says, all truth is created. It's all personal opinion, personal perspective, personal feelings, personal beliefs, no ideas. So here you have a major difference between these two cultures. Truth is discovered and truth is created. It would go like this. You would say to an adult, what did Jesus mean when he said this? Where the youth would say, when Jesus said that, what does it mean to you? Do you see the difference? Adults, what did Jesus mean when he said this? In other words, external, and you can discover it. But for young people, it's, well, when Jesus said that, what does it mean to you? In other words, you determine your value, your belief, your feelings is just as valid as whatever Jesus said. And that's a result of this progression culturally. Another is this: for adults, older people, if it is true, it will work. For younger people, see if you can tell the difference. For adults, if it is true, it will work. For younger people, if it works, it is true. For example, a pastor falls into sexual immorality and it sweeps the community, the church, everything. Adults would say his problem was he is not living the truth. Why? Truth is objective. It's true whether you believe it or not. And the problem is not with truth. The problem is with you. You're not living the truth. But to many youth, they would say, well, it's not true. What? Whatever the pastor taught. Why? Because it didn't work. Do you see the difference? Because it didn't work. And where it switches from adults, where the problem is the person, to youth, where the problem is truth, because all truth is personal. You discover the truth. It's personal opinion, personal feeling, personal ideas. This is why George Lucas says, you notice that Luke in Star Wars uses that quite a bit through the film, not to rely on pure logic, not to rely on computers, but to rely on faith. That is what use the force is, a leap of faith. And later Lucas said, trust your feelings. And what has happened, we've shifted from an objective culture to a subjective culture. Illustration of this, Katie Turek, with MSNBC, I think she's with, was interviewing Michael Wolff. Michael Wolff had written a book critical of the White House called Fire and Fury. And none of it was documented, no documentation. And Katie said, well, if people are questioning it, because when it came out, people started questioning, well, this is never said that. Another person, you can't, I was not even in that meeting. And so they really started to question the book, Fire and Fury. And Katie Turek said, if people are questioning it, why not produce the evidence? To me, that makes sense. Here was Michael Wolff's response. My evidence is the book. Read the book. If it makes sense to you, if it strikes a chord, if it rings true, it is true. Whoa. Katie didn't get it. She responded this way. I read it. A lot of the stuff did read as and feel true. Right there shows we've gone from truth being objective to truth being subjective, where now truth is emotional. 57% believe or suspect that the only intellectual way to live is to make the best choices you can in every situation based upon the feelings at the moment. Not upon truth, not anything objective, no, how you feel at the moment. And then in Barna Trend 2018, Barna Research Group said, truth is increasingly regarded as something felt or relative, rather than something known or absolute. A total shift from objectivity, subjectivity, and emotions. Every year they put a new word into the dictionary. In 2016, the new word was post-truth. See how the dictionary defines post-truth. Post-truth, relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal belief. So we need to understand this if we're going to pass our faith on to the next generation, that their emphasis is more feelings and emotions, not objective truth. Barna in 2017, a Barna Research Group, said morality of self-fulfillment says each person's feelings are the measuring stick for his or her own life. And many Christians adopted this self-centered morality. When here in Psalms 89:14, it says, unfailing love, your emotions, and truth, objectivity, walks before you. So give your servant an understanding heart to discern good and evil. 1 Kings 3. John 8:32. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. To wrap up this section, I'll have a little formula that I use. When you come to any issue like God, say you're teaching on God, you're studying on God. Here's 4 questions that I ask. 1, what do you need to know about the subject to become a true follower of Christ? In other words, what does a person need to know about God? He's a creator God. He's this kind of God. He's a loving God. He's a righteous God, etc. Second, how do you know it's true? First question, what do you need to know about God to become a true disciple of Christ? The next question is, which is apologetics. How do you even know it's true? You've got to deal with that in today's culture. And then third, because today, if it's not relevant, it's not true. So the third question is this: so what? What? Yeah. So what do you need to know about that truth to become a true follower of Christ? Second, how do you know it's truth? Third, so what? How does it relate to me? Why is it even relevant to my life? This is where 84% of young adults said they would attend a church if that church presented truth in an understandable way that relates to my life now. Now, this is the most amazing stat I've ever heard. 84% of Christians 18 to 29 years old admit they have no idea how the Bible applies to their field or professional interest. 84%. This is why we must answer the question, what? And then the fourth question. First question, what do you need to know? How do you know it's true? So what? And the fourth one, how can I experience it? How can I make it personal in my own life, in relationship with the truth giver, and in relationship with others? That's the thing we need to understand about our culture. Now, there's 2 other areas I can only briefly touch on. The first is an epistemological shift in truth, which I just explained. Second is a massive data glut. With the emergence of the internet, a massive glut of information. It's not that kids aren't as smart today, that they only have an 8-second attention span. The issue is that they're overloaded. We never thought anyone could be overloaded in your brain because a brain has such a capacity. But I think now you can say the web is so huge, it overloads the brain. That's why they only got a attention span of maybe 8 seconds. Now think of this, so the global internet, almost 5 billion users. Who ever dreamed 25 years ago, 35 years ago, that you could have 5 billion people in all the culture thing around, all connected by one item, the internet? It's overloading. And then total web pages, 14 trillion. Whoa, 14 trillion total web pages. It would take 2.8 quintillion years to count those pages. Whoa, now think of that. That's 2.8 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15 zeros, quintillion years to count the internet pages. The process of the internet in just 24 months, 1.7 quadrillion, 1.7 quadrillion gigabytes of data. Do you know how big that is? Our minds can't even comprehend it. And yet it's going on around us all the time, especially in the lives of younger people. With the internet, a gigabyte is 64,782 pages of data, 8.5 by 11. So you take that 2.7 quadrillion gigabytes multiplied out, it would come out that every day the internet processes 112 sextillion pages every single day. That would mean 1.3 quintillion pages per second, or 78 quintillion pages per minute. We can't even do that. Kids are in overload. They're in overload with this. The Washington Post said it would take 11 trillion years to download the entire web. I don't think you would live that long. 11 trillion years to download information on the internet. The hours of video uploaded in 2019, 720,000 hours a day were uploaded to the internet. That's every day, 365 days for the year. We are in overload. The third is pervasive internet pornography. Chuck Swindoll, Pastor Swindoll said, pornography is the greatest cancer in the history of the church. The greatest cancer. We have never faced anything that simultaneously destroys so many people, so many pastors, so many youth pastors, so many marriages, so many relationships as pornography does simultaneously in the world, in every culture. We've never had that. But pastors will say to me, well, Josh, look, we've always had pornography from writing on the walls of the caves. So what's the big deal? Oh, get real. The big deal is this. Yes, we've always had pornography, but we've never had such a glut that is available to us constantly. Here's why pornography is more critical today in doing more damage. Think of this. The difference between now and 35 years ago, pornography is available, it's accessible, it's affordable, it's anonymous, it's appealing, it's aggressive, it's addictive, it's accepting, and it's arousing. Every one of those 9 A's is true of pornography. That's why it has such a destructive factor right in the lives of Christians and Christian homes, churches, and pastors. How big is just porn on the internet? Whew. My mind can't comprehend this. How big is porn on the internet? In 1998, there were 14 million pornographic web pages. In 2003, there were 260 million pornographic web pages. In 2006, 420 million web pages. 2010, 500 million pornographic web pages, one click away. In 2012, 986 million. 2014, 2.3 billion pornographic web pages. Now that was 6 years ago. But here's the key. Totally accessible immediately, one click away. We have never faced anything so like that, so expansive and so destructive. To look at all the web pages, it would take you 23 million years. For one person just to page through and look at all the pages, it would take 23 million years just to look at the pornographic web pages, one click away. In your room, at school, on the bus, wherever. Look at YouTube. Wow. Video hours watched. This is the number of hours watched of pornography on YouTube each day. Over 1 billion hours, not minutes, hours. 1 billion a day. That's 365 billion hours a year clicking on the porn. and you think your child, your precious little grandchild won't see it, well, you're wrong. In 2017, one of the top 3 porn sites had over 28.5 billion visits to their site. That's only one of 36 million pornographic websites. Video hours watched just on YouTube on each day, over 1 billion hours watched. You take another website, just one porn website, if all the data was printed out on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, like this, it was printed out like that, just one website, it would fill 580 million 4-drawer file cabinets. That's one site. If just the data on that site was printed out. Another top porn site, if it was all printed out, it would fill 20 billion 4-drawer file cabinets. Come on, folks. Your mind can't even comprehend. 4 billion? With about 1,500 pages in each drawer? It printed out what it has? 30% of all pornography is watched by children. By children, 30%. Now think of that. 20 billion 4-drawer file cabinets printed out. That would mean 6 billion of those were watched by children. Another website, not even near the largest. If everything on that website every day was printed out, what they distributed, it would fill on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. It would fill an entire Empire State Building every single day, 365 days a year. That's just one website printed out what it distributes in a day. That's hard to grasp. You look at how extensive it is. Good research shows that 90% of U.S. college men, 60% of U.S. college women watched pornography before they were 18 years of age. Do Christians watch pornography? One study showed that over half of evangelical pastors admit they have struggled with porn, 57%. Dr. Roberts, a man I greatly respect, a pastor, head of Pure Desire, worked with 3,000 churches with their pastors and men and women on pornography. It came out there, it would be average out up to 13 to 24-year-olds in the church, 42% actively pursue pornography on the internet. Over 70% of all new pornographic websites are for women. Men and women, we have a perfect storm. We've been hit by an epistemological shift of truth. We've been hit with knowledge, with it. I said years ago, it's going to produce intellectual skepticism. It has produced more intellectual skepticism than ever in the history of the world. You say to a young person something is true, they'll say, how do you know? They could cover something new tomorrow. Then second or third, pornography. Pornography. That is probably the number one threat to ever passing your faith on to your children. So this is what I have seen in working with young people and being a reader. Take it seriously.